Have you gotten sucked into the hype of the hottest new fat burner or peptide that's marketed to revolutionize your gains or progress? If you haven't wasted your money or about to, I'm going to tell you exactly what compounds are exactly that, a waste of your money, some that might prove to be somewhat of help, and some that absolutely could be. Now, the peptides compounds I'm going to be talking today are not over the counter. Most of them are actually going to be research chemicals. And why they get branded that way is that's the only way that they can be sold within the United States. So I'm going to start with the first one, the most common. That's going to be clenbuterol. Okay, clenbuterol is a beta adrenergic receptor. Right, there are three beta receptors: alpha, beta, and gamma. Can't remember. Again, I know like a ton of information, but about 90% of it, and the 10% I don't know is usually the vocabulary, but I know how everything works. Anyway, the difference between those receptors is on which organs or parts of the body that they work on to elicit their fat burning effects. Clenbuterol is going to have a lot of the higher side effects when it comes to heart rate, blood pressure, and act on the cardiac tissue more, whereas like albuterol, mirabegron, virabegron, excuse me, are going to act on the beta 1, beta 2, beta 3. I think it said alpha, beta, it's beta 1, 2, or 3, okay? So put that to the side. We don't really need to delve into the science, okay? What we do know is that clenbuterol is, in fact, a steroid, okay? Not in the sense of anabolic, but it is a qualified and prescribable medication. The reason why I bring this up first is because a lot of these research chemicals and peptides are not for human consumption. They don't have any, if not, they don't have any human test trials done, or even clinical trials, or even past stage 1, 2, 3, or FDA approval. Some of them have gotten some of the way, but a lot of these things they get their efficacy misconstrued, or people tend to think they do what they do because they extrapolate or they take animal data, right? What this compound does on animals, and then extrapolate it or project it on humans. Okay, quite simply, for instance, SLUPPP is a SLUPP 332 is a great example of this, and we'll get into that in a second. But again, coming back full circle to clenbuterol, the reason why again I think it is probably the most effective is it is just one that is the more safe of the non over the counter fat burners in the bodybuilding world. But again, I want you to take that with a grain of salt. Just because it is an effective medication, when used for bodybuilding things, just like albuterol, so on and so forth, and the other beta adrenergic receptor modulators that I talked about, okay, that doesn't mean that they are appropriate for using in high doses for long durations, okay? But you can safely use clenbuterol so long as it is for a shorter duration and it is monitored. In addition, you keep your electrolyte and water intake high. You supplement with taurine, right? Taurine is an amino acid that is going to be very effective for cardiac tissue and cardiac health and function, and that could get depleted with clenbuterol. You, through any of these fat burners, whether they work or don't, you can't expect night and day changes. I like to equate clenbuterol to like maybe burning 100 to 200 calories per day, if that, depending on the dose and the duration. In addition, you do build a tolerance. You build a tolerance to the side effects, right? But you also build a tolerance to the effect that it does. And then what happens, the leaner you get, you start to use clenbuterol, right? It helps with burning a little bit more calories throughout the day, but you're slowly doing less movement. You're slowly having less passive movement and calories burned because you're more in a deficit, in a lower body fat state. That difference that clenbuterol made is may no longer be the only thing that you need to adjust. But it does provide an energy aspect, right? It does provide a little bit of that up and that kick, which is why I think it's a pretty decent compound to use for the short term for something like a prep. Okay, I don't really think for a lifestyle or a summer shred it's really appropriate to use any medications or steroids of that matter for this specific purpose. We'll get into more in a few. Okay, the next one is going to be GW. Okay, Cardarine. That is a SARM. Even though it doesn't really act on the androgen receptor itself, it's still classified as like a research chemical SARM world. It's still kind of sold on the same basic websites that do that. Okay, essentially what this is going to do is it's going to act again on the cardiac tissue, increase thermogenesis, energy production. It's going to increase focus. My personal experience with it, it's almost like getting a second win. So I've done everything that I've spoken about, so I can tell you from, well, almost everything. There's one on the list that I definitely would never try. Um, but my experience with Cardarine is it pretty much makes cardio like just a breeze, right? But just like clenbuterol acting on the heart, this one acts on the heart even stronger. Okay, like very serious issues acting on the heart. And that's why I don't ever give people dosages or durations or anything like that with my content. A, because I think that's a cookie cutter approach and not everybody should be approached in the same way. But also, I don't want someone to take this information and run with it. Okay. Again, it is classified as a research chemical. There's not long-term or even really short-term studies done on humans under a controlled environment, a double-blind controlled study where there is actual evidence provided to how it affects you in the short and long term in that specific given compound. Plus, when you buy this stuff off websites and peptide, people with discount codes and broccoli hair and cross earrings, like you don't know where they're getting it from. There's no quality control, again, which means that it could be underdose, overdose, or not even what you think you're getting. So cardarine is another effective one that I've used in a prep. I don't believe it does much, in my personal opinion, the fat burning, calorie burning side, other than you're able to do more cardio harder. So with that comes a little bit more. Okay. Next is going to be SLUPP332. That's one of these newer research chemicals. It's an exercise mimetic. What that means is it gets your body to pretty much mimic what it would do during exercise. The big issue with this, aside from the fact that it's only been tested on freaking rodents, and that is a research chemical and just came about, and people are pushing it because there's a lot of money to be made on it. The effective dose that they prescribe or that people will suggest is extrapolated off the rat data. And if you look at the rat data, you need dozens more times more than what the suggested dose is to even match the same proportionate dose to the rats. What I mean to say is what you're getting suggested by every influencer out there is not even close to what you would need to have the same effect or even an effective dose. But at that point, again, we have no studies, no information, and you're going well beyond what was been tested in rats. So it's just not, the juice is not worth the squeeze, okay? I do want to also add, and I do this with all my fat loss content, is a lot of people don't understand the difference between fat burning and fat loss, okay? You can burn fat as a fuel or use fat, but that doesn't mean you're gonna lose body fat if you're not in a caloric deficit. So just because you're using these things that activate or mobilize fat or transport fat to be used as energy does not mean that you're gonna have less body fat if you're not in a caloric deficit, okay? Very, very important to understand that. All right, next up, we'll talk about GLPs. The reason why I classify this as a fat burner is because your goal is to really burn fat with it, or you're in a reverse to help with this hunger signaling. Now, I have a piece of content all about GLPs. The one thing that I want to bring up here is just that they're single, double, and triple actions. So there's first gen, second gen, third gen. So semaglutide would be the first gen, tirzepatide second, and retatrutide essentially the third, right? They have a little bit more fat burning capabilities the further generation you go rather than appetite suppression. I think this, again, because they're medications, more so the semaglutide, a little bit less the tirzepatide and the retatrutide coming last because it's the newest. I tend to lean towards semaglutide being the first option I would ever use myself or with a client. I do think they are effective as fat loss tools and agents, but I don't want to spend another large portion of the content right on a video that I already have. So please, if you want to know more about GLPs, find that piece of content in my channel on the same playlist. Last but not least, we'll talk about DHB. Actually, we got two more. DHB. I'm just going to play it out and simply say there's no need for this. Essentially what DHB will have your body eat itself to death. And the reason why it's so dangerous is because you're only going to really use it in a very depleted state, okay? Essentially just, it turns your body into overdrive, has the cells really run themselves in the ground, and there's no stopping it. I personally am not extremely familiar with the mechanics of action. I just know the effect, the result. It is very strong, it works, okay? It mobilizes fat to an extreme. And that could also be visceral fat, okay? That could be fat around your organs. That could be essential fat around your brain, around the cell membranes themselves, okay? So I do know that, right? Don't need to get into the intricacies of the science about how this chemical works. Just know that it's extremely dangerous. I don't see it beneficial for anybody. Last but not least, we'll talk about T3 and T4, two thyroid hormones. There are more, and there are more medications related to the thyroid. I do not like to classify these as fat burners, but people will use them in a state where they want to burn fat. I'm here to tell you that when you mess with the thyroid, you're playing with fire. You should not be touching thyroid medication or hormones unless you have a verified deficiency through blood work or symptoms. I want to really double tap that. You should not be messing with your thyroid if there's no issue with your thyroid. You do not need to overactivate your thyroid in order to get in shape. You just need to make sure your thyroid is running optimally. If you are in a dieted state, a deficit for a long time, and especially non-PDs, you can expect that your thyroid will start to drop in function. You can troubleshoot with Again, my suggestion would be both T3 and T4. If you understand the mechanics of the thyroid, you understand that just supplementing with one might not fix the issue. But it is only to get the thyroid working in a good spot. Second, too many people take T3, T4, and then they just completely stop it after and don't wean off. You got to understand, there's a negative feedback loop, just like most hormonal functions in the body. And once you stop something, it could really cause negative effects, and that bounce back might not happen as seamless. I try not to delve into too much detail with all these fat burners, but I do think I've given some pretty good general information to as their efficacy and their usage, and giving you enough information to make a decent decision. If you find that you're struggling finding a use for these things, how to introduce them into your program or protocol, and you like some one-on-one help, please not only subscribe to this content, watch my other videos, but feel free to message me, or even in the link in the description of my channel, there's a link to an coaching application where you can see what it would like to be with me to work on one-on-one. If I sent you this actually as a piece of content for you to review, and we're not working together, and you would like to know more about my one-on-one coaching, just shoot me a message. Let me know, Coach, I want to know what it's all about, and I'd be happy to explain it to you.